You wrote a book that I had the privilege of publishing, Through the Storm.
The interview wasn't just about Joni Lamb sharing her side of things. It was about carefully shaping how the public perceives her. She wasn't just explaining herself, she was being framed as a woman of God facing opposition, almost like a modern-day spiritual warrior. This kind of messaging is powerful because it speaks directly to her core audience, many of whom are conditioned to see attacks on religious leaders as part of a greater, spiritual battle. Daystar, as a network, has always leaned into this kind of rhetoric. When facing criticism, they don't just defend, they go on the offensive, positioning themselves as victims of persecution for their beliefs. And Joni? She's now at the center of that, especially after everything that's gone down with Daystar's leadership changes and the controversy surrounding her personal life. So, what's the real goal here? Damage control, of course. The interview wasn't really about revealing some hidden truth. It was about reinforcing her credibility, keeping the audience loyal, and making sure Daystar stays strong despite the backlash. And let's be real, if there was any real dirt, it wasn't getting aired in this sit-down. Because
I'm sure there are things I could do better. I'm sure there are things I could have said better.
Let's be real. Joni has been under heavy fire lately. For months, people have been questioning her decisions, especially after Jonathan Lamb's leaked audio revealed a side of Joni that most people had never seen before. Honestly, if I hadn't heard those recordings myself, I would have never believed Joni could say the things she said. But Jonathan had receipts, and now Joni is scrambling to repair her reputation. The problem? It's not working. Viewers completely turned on her. Instead of winning people over, the interview made things worse. So now let's dive into some of the comments, reactions, and key moments from the interview and see why this PR stunt completely backfired.
But I was in a relationship with a young man that I kept trying to pull him up to my level. And in the process, he was pulling me down, and I knew that he wasn't God's best for me. But if the enemy could get me with the wrong person, then that would be detrimental really to my future and what God had planned for me. So I wrote a letter to the Lord, and I just basically kind of started out and said, you know, sometimes I just wish, this is funny, sometimes I wish I could just go be with you, Jesus. And so I just wrote this letter, and basically in the letter I said, I want my life to be in your perfect will.
Of course, this whole thing was scripted and carefully edited. No surprises there. Stephen Strang, the publisher of Joni's book, also happens to be the host of the interview. So let's be real, this was never going to be a tough, hard-hitting conversation. The video is 57 minutes long, and honestly, I can count on one hand how many times Stephen actually spoke. The rest is all Joni, and in classic Joni Lamb fashion, she spent the entire time carefully crafting her narrative, telling hand-picked, polished stories designed to make her look like a victim of adversity, a woman of faith overcoming obstacles, and a leader expanding Daystar's mission. She starts off with her childhood and dating life, talking about how she dated the wrong guy and had to write a letter to God to find the right path.
And at 19, I came to a place where I wanted to die. I just knelt down and I said, Jesus, I know that you're God, but I want to die today. But I'm going to give you 30 days of my life 100% to be fair, and I'll do 100% of what you tell me.
I've noticed something. These people always have a way of making God the center of every major life decision. It's always, the Lord told me this, God spoke to me about that, I wrote a letter to God, and everything changed. Sound familiar? Because Doug Weiss did the exact same thing. Doug once said he gave God 30 days to turn his life around, and surprise, everything magically worked out.
It was about a 6-month process, and then the Lord said to me, okay, I want you to get your house in order. And I was kind of like, what? Get my house in order? What do you mean, Lord?
Joni's version? She wrote a letter to God, and suddenly her whole life took a different direction. Same template, same emotional setup. Then comes the real emotional hook of the interview, Marcus's passing. This was one of the biggest key highlights of the video. She talks about how Marcus died and how she grieved for exactly 6 months. Then, suddenly, God spoke to her.
I don't listen to that, Steve. I haven't watched one podcast. I haven't watched one YouTube that would have, lies or half truths.
Joni.
And somehow that meant marrying Doug Weiss. Yeah, we all know how that played out. A viewer pointed out something that doesn't add up. Joni said she cried for 6 months, but she paid a deposit for her honeymoon less than 10 months after her husband's death. And someone else added, honeymoon was booked before the engagement was announced. Joni grieved for 6 months? Wasn't she texting Doug by February? 2 to 3 months after Marcus died? And didn't Doug file for divorce a couple of months after Marcus passed? What am I missing? She was asked about the storm she's facing in the media. You know, the whole Jonathan versus Joni Lamb scandal, the leaked audio, the backlash, whatever you want to call it. And here's what she had to say.
Doug doesn't look at any social media whatsoever. He doesn't let anything go into his brain. There's lots of good things he could look at, but he's like, I don't want to look at
If I want to talk to a fool, I'll go to a bar and just meet him straight up.
Joni claims she doesn't watch YouTube videos about her, yet she has her own staff making response videos to those same YouTube videos, reciting a script she approved. Now, how exactly is she approving response videos if she's not watching the content they're responding to? It's the same old tactic, trying to act above the drama, pretending like she's not paying attention, while behind the scenes she's carefully controlling the narrative. And let's not forget, she did the same thing with Doug Weiss. She claimed Doug isn't on social media.
Like somebody was telling me recently that they look at you and you know, you're a big celebrity and everything else.
First off, I don't think of myself as a celebrity at all. I'm just an ordinary person. People say you're exactly the same on TV as you are in person, which I think that's probably the greatest compliment somebody could give.
If Joni and Doug aren't watching or listening to social media, then how do they know about all the backlash they're getting? If they were truly unbothered and not paying attention, they wouldn't be. Rushing to delete old content that contradicts their new story, making response videos through their staff using carefully approved scripts, trying so hard to cast doubt on the people exposing them. They are way too invested in controlling the narrative for people who supposedly don't care what's being said about them online. It's obvious they're watching, listening, and scrambling behind the scenes. The desperation to clear their names and attack those speaking out proves that they're fully aware of how bad this looks. Laura Lynn Thompson, who has been giving Daystar a serious run for their money, also dropped a comment on the video. Let Joni know she's welcome on my show to give her side anytime. I'm having the best time tonight, hanging out with her son and daughter-in-law, who are two of the finest people on the planet. Rebecca and JW wrote a letter regarding Pete that needs to be turned into the police. Why harboring an alleged perpetrator, asking for a friend? And now, the unction with Pastor Ray, who has become Daystar's worst nightmare, also dropped an open invitation. Tell Joni to come on the function. The message is loud and clear. Joni has a chance to speak for herself. But will she? One viewer immediately backed up the call-out, adding, she's already been exposed for her lies by the multiple recordings her own son exposed. Repent, Joni, before it's too late. This is exactly what Joni and her team don't want. Real accountability on a platform that won't hand her a pre-approved script or allow her to talk in circles.
I think the one thing the Lord has assured me of is that not only will He be faithful, but, you know, truth always prevails. And so, you know, He's just assured me that He is better at defending me than I am.
I honestly think Joni Lamb lives in her own fantasy world, because in the real world, the one you and I live in, we've heard too much to believe the polished, picture-perfect image she tries to sell on TV. Let's be real, the Joni we see in those leaked audio recordings, that's not the same Joni smiling on Daystar and holding hands in prayer. Would you really believe that the person speaking in those recordings, the one who was manipulative, controlling, and power-hungry, is the same person who goes on TV acting like a humble servant of God? And yeah, Joni is a celebrity, because the last time I checked, ordinary people don't live in mansions, own a private jet, drop $100,000 on a one-week honeymoon. That's not ordinary life. That's celebrity status. This next comment perfectly sums up why Joni's interview was a failure, not just in changing public perception, but in actually addressing the real issues. Mr. Strang, I listened to this interview with an open mind and heart, as I want to be objective and not blindsided in forming the wrong opinion. A wise old saint of God who pastored me always stressed that in times of conflict between people, there are two sides to every pancake, and neither side is ever 100% perfect. However, my hope of walking away with better insight and understanding fell flat, as you left many questions unaddressed. Among them are whether Joni regrets her mistakes and how she foresees a path to healing with her kids. Also, I would like to have heard Joni explain exactly what lies she believes podcasters are propagating. Without an explanation, we are left to think that Joni is asserting there was no essay of her granddaughter, and that the whole disaster at Daystar is a wholly fabricated scandal for the sole purpose of inflicting undue harm against her, Doug Weiss, and Daystar. Jonathan, Susie, and the social media channels are 100% responsible for spreading big, felonious lies for ill-gotten gain. If that is what she implies, she should say so and offer her reasons for feeling that way. Simply saying God will deal with the money-hungry bloggers is not a meaningful answer. Her views of what constitutes the truth concerning the allegations against her would have also been welcome.